Okay. Yeah, thank you guys for being here. Today we're gonna do a cool guest lecture about conditional access, and we're gonna hear a bit from Fabian Bader about conditional access and about his journey. Fabian, you're a Microsoft MVP. I saw on your blog post. I think I shared your blog as well.
Yes, correct.
How does someone even become that? Because I've never really dove into that. But how does one become a Microsoft MVP?
So basically, it's an award that you get, awarded by Microsoft, and either other MVPs or Microsoft personnel can, nominate you for this. And it's basically meant as an award for people who are active in the Microsoft ecosystem and, either blog, talk, or contribute in any other meaningful way to the community. And it's an award that gives you not only a nice title, but also the ability to get in contact with the product groups behind the features. So it's definitely something that is one of the nice perks to get in contact with all the people at Microsoft and talk about features before they are even released, making at least sometimes a dent in there, and hopefully sometimes being able to move the needle before it gets to public preview or to GA. But I guess that not always works out as you might hope. But overall, great initiative that Microsoft has for many years now, and I'm super happy to be for the fourth year now a Microsoft MVP.
That's super awesome, man. And once again, thank you for being here. I saw your talk with I saw your talk about conditional access at the end of 2025. You did a very nice talk. I think it was at Troopers 2025, right? With
Correct. That was in June. Back in June was Troopers, and then I think in the end of the year I also had one at the WordPress Ninja Summit.
Yeah, you did one with Dirk-Jan Mollema.
Yes. That's correct. That was the one with Troopers.
Yes.
Where we dove into, I would say not so much intended and some of the intended bypasses of conditional access.
Yeah. So you guys did research together for a time, right? I listened to the talk. You said that because of your work at the current company where you are, you had access to a lot of data. So you could see a lot of FOSI groups that were a bit harder to otherwise guess because the guessing would take way too long, right? And you were able to do something to do more research about that and look at conditional access. But I think that's a bit for later in the talk. Maybe just tell us a bit about yourself, Fabian, and how you got into this amazing work that you're doing with the cloud pen testing and diving into Microsoft and Office 365, what you're working on right now and what you're going to show us today.
Yeah, so I'm now over 20 years in the industry. Started as a sysadmin back then, doing a lot of different things from Active Directory to storage systems, networking, data center, basically everything you can think of. Back then, I was able to do at least in some capacity at some time. And over time, I was always fond about security, but over time I focused my career more around this, got into more of the Microsoft stack, since a lot of the enterprise environments that at least I worked with heavily relied on at the time. So back then, of course, it was a lot of Active Directory, and then slowly but gradually everything moved to the cloud, and this was then the introduction of Entra ID. At the beginning, of course, a lot of ADFS servers still, but nowadays I guess a lot of people have switched over to password hash sync or other methods, and yeah, Entra ID is becoming more and more the central place to not only administer users like we did back in Active Directory, but also have, of course, a security plane where we must stop bad guys from getting in. So when I started, there was, of course, a lot of VPNs and firewalls to keep people out. But now, since we have cloud services and access basically from anywhere on the planet to our emails and sensitive data whatsoever, yeah, it got more and more important to secure those surfaces that are always exposed and always will be exposed, because yeah, that's how stuff works nowadays. And yeah, over the time, I started to get more interested in the little nitty gritty features behind all of that, and look into how stuff works. And yeah, funnily enough, I think everybody here who has poked a bit around at some stuff at some point finds something that is working as it's not intended to work. And then you either be like, okay, keep it at that, or you start poking more and more and more. And in many cases, I did that. And yeah, so I never had in my mind that I would be in any way a security researcher, or how you want to call it. But it was more of a curiosity driven thing that just happened. And yeah, I guess a lot of now people doing security research didn't start as in like, I want to be this and that, but they were curious and interested and just working with the technology, or researching technology and finding quirks all around, and were being able to, yeah, in the end, maybe find something that was considered an actual vulnerability, or at least behavior that Microsoft wants to fix or other vendors want to fix. By day, I'm also working as a so-called cloud security architect. As always in IT, we all have fancy titles, but what that means, I help our customers mostly to get the Microsoft Defender and Sentinel security stack installed and also working. So we also have in Clucania, the company I work for, SOC, a managed stock offering. And yeah, so that is basically where, of course, we also see a lot of stuff happening. And yeah, that definitely helps in doing research to have a broad data set available where you can check if something is just an outlier in your lab because you messed something up, or if it's something that happens everywhere. Yeah, and today, maybe let me also share my screen here a bit.
Yeah.
I think this part we already talked about, so let's just jump over it real quick. What I want to talk about is oh, the preview. Oh, that's something. If I switch over to the other screen, it will not show my screen anymore, it seems. Please remind me if at any point you don't see my screen because I clicked somewhere else and I messed this up.
Yes, definitely. And guys, also feel free to ask any questions. I think Fabian is more than open to answer any questions that you guys might have. Fabian, I think it might also be good just for a little bit to talk about the basics, just to get like beginners that maybe they really want to understand what we're going to be talking about today, but maybe they don't know what conditional access is, or why it's important, or like I mean, Office, for example, in the Netherlands, I think it gets used by more than 70% of companies, big companies, to use email and Teams and SharePoint and all of this stuff. I don't know about like in Germany, do a lot of companies use it, but like also just the basic how it ties in, why is this important for a lot of companies to also have some conditional access.
Definitely. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I try to look over there, and hopefully, Anas, if I don't see them, please hold me true and just interrupt me. So what I brought today is basically one talk, but it's not meant as I'm going through this talk. So please keep this open. Let's discuss stuff. If you have questions, just pop them in the chat, and I will try to answer them. And let's keep this as interactive as possible, and not some slides along the way, or just listening to me rambling about conditional access. Yeah, so that's a rough agenda. Let's have a quick look into what conditional access is. Do you see the slide now? So do you see the yellow slide with the holes?
Yes.
Okay. Well, for some reason it's
the German cheese.
Yeah, the German Swiss cheese. Yeah, so Microsoft is calling conditional access the zero trust policy engine in Microsoft's Entra ID. And yeah, I know zero trust. It got a lot of bad marketing down the way, because a lot of people just were like, hey, if you buy our product, you have zero trust. But the principle behind it is definitely something that is quite good, to make sure that you make sure that everything that you access is not an unauthenticated access, but an authenticated access. So we don't have any anonymous access to sensitive data or any data as something like that. But basically, we make sure that we have some authentication as part of this. So the basic idea is we have a user on the left-hand side, we have a resource on the right-hand side, and then this user can use something like a username and a password and authenticate. And since this is not enough, we also have conditional access in the loop. And conditional access now can do different things. We can enforce different settings. So this could be, hey, yes, your password is correct, but you still need MFA. So give me a second factor from maybe something like the Microsoft Authenticator, or hey, yeah, your password is correct, but I need a more stronger authentication method, maybe something like a FIDO key or a passkey. Or maybe, hey, I want you to come from a device that is from your company or that is compliant. So compliance in this regard means it's managed by some MDM, that could be Intune, but also others, and basically adheres to whatever the company says is compliant. Then there is also stuff like risk. So, hey, is this user coming from a Tor IP address? Always one of the most used examples in conditional access, because it's very easy to trigger. But basically, this would be a sign-in risk. So the user comes, and there are some risk factors assigned to this sign-in, and we can therefore maybe block him. Or if the user itself has a risk, that could be exposed password because it was leaked, then we might mark the user as high risk, and the user cannot access any of the resources until this risk is mitigated. And there's also other things like IP address checks. And after everything like this is mangled through and everything is okay, we finally get access to the resource that we wanted. And this is not where conditional access basically ends. There is one more thing, and this is the continuous access evaluation. It's something Microsoft implemented a few years back, and now more and more products and features supported finally. And what this is, it's basically the ability to go in, and after you initially signed into a resource, normally this is it. For now, maybe a few hours or maybe a few days, you will not be rechecked by conditional access. And if something changes in here, there's no easy way to just revoke your access tokens. But with continuous access evaluation, if maybe your IP address is changing to something that is not allowed, we can now be like, hey, you no longer can access your emails. You have to go through conditional access again, and then you can access it again. So this all can happen either very interactive, or sometimes it's also non-interactive, meaning it's in the background. So for the user, they don't see it, they don't feel it. It just happens automatically, and only if there is something wrong, like they are not allowed to access something, they would be then even knowledgeable that conditional access is doing something in their environment. The important part is that conditional access always works after the authentication. So this means in the beginning, you always have to authenticate with like at least something like a username or password before conditional access even kicks in. Meaning every time that somebody is getting blocked by your conditional access policy in your environment, they at least had the correct username and the correct password for this user, or another method of authentication. But username and password, I guess, is still the most prevalent at the moment.
Yeah, Fabian, I wanted to ask you about this point because, for example, for some time, I have had someone send push notifications to my phone from the Microsoft Authenticator app, and I am pretty sure he doesn't have my password because I changed the password in approximately, let's say, 3 days, about 4 times from different devices, which were all clean. And still, I get the push notifications delivered to my phone about logging, about someone. Yeah, it's probably like one of those fatigue attacks, about the push notification fatigue attacks. But it's not an enterprise Outlook. It's just a normal user Outlook.
Oh, okay, so it's basically the live account.
Yeah.
That something like this could even happen in your enterprise, and the reason why this can happen is basically, there I just have to change what I share. Let me just reshare my screen and do this full screen. Yeah, that's much better. So what we have in Entra ID is authentication methods, and one of the authentication methods is the Microsoft Authenticator. Many of you might know this method as just the MFA thing, where you can look up MFA or you get push notifications and have to press a number or something. But it also supports something that is called passwordless notifications, meaning the attacker in this case, and this works the same for the consumer variant, just needs to enter your email address and you will get the notification automatically. And that is the reason why nowadays you can change a lot of different things, like require number matching. So you have to enter a specific number. It's not just yes or no. Or in enterprise, you can even show, hey, show the application you're currently signing in, show the geographic based on the IP address. All that stuff can basically be configured here. And in the consumer space, you cannot configure all of this, but it's the same thing. Nobody has your password in this case, but since you have a passwordless authentication with the consumer variant enabled, it's enough to just be like, hey, I want to use this passwordless method, and then Microsoft will send a ping to your phone. And if you press no, or cancel, they will most likely flag the IP address as risky, where the attacker is coming from, or the person who is trying to mess with you. But in many cases, you cannot even fall for it anymore, because you would have to enter or select in the consumer space the correct number. And I think they always show you 3 options. So yes, you could get it right, but yeah, you would have to really guess something here.
You're actually correct, man. It's pretty stupid from me because I changed my password so many times. Right now I logged into Outlook from the incognito mode. And you're actually right. It has apparently the ability to sign in passwordless. I looked into the settings, but as a normal user, you cannot change any of this, of course. It's only when you have enterprise. So, yeah, actually, thank you for clarifying that. I'll let you continue.
Yeah, don't worry. So, if we have something like conditional access and we have taken the first hurdle and now we want to go through conditional access and configure it, we need to say when conditional access should be triggered. And this could be either a resource, a user action, or something called an authentication context. I won't go into too much detail here, but basically this is something where you can have fancy stuff like if you in an application do some special action, then again conditional access should trigger, something like that. Resource and user action are the most common. Resource meaning which resource you are currently accessing. So you don't define, oh, I want to scope this to Outlook, but you rather scope it to the Exchange online system behind that. And the user action, that would be something like if the user wants to register a device, for example. Both of those could be something that you can scope. And if we just have a quick look into conditional access and have a new policy in here, we can see we have this target resources, and there is the all resources. Or if we go down here, we get the other options, user actions. And this could be either register or join a device or register security information. So this way you can even have something like, hey, if you want to register security information, you have to come from a company device. But if you want to just log into your Outlook, that's not needed. So there you can have very granular control.
Yes, this is awesome, Fabian. Maybe just like a couple seconds about this page. You're currently on the Microsoft Entra Admin Center, and this is a page you usually see only if you are the owner of a tenant on Office. If you can actually control it. So maybe some people in the group have never seen this page before. Maybe like a couple seconds about what this is and what you can do from here to begin with.
Yes, of course. So the Entra portal is basically entra.microsoft.com, and it allows you to control anything around your environment that is related to Entra. Nowadays, that is a lot of different stuff. So as you can see on the left side, there's a lot of different scenarios and features you can configure. And one of those features is conditional access, but there's also users, groups. Nowadays, of course, we have agents and we have devices. All that stuff is all in the Entra ID, but old name was Azure AD. So basically it is the same as you have on-prem with an Active Directory, but now in the cloud. So you can have users, they are part of a group, they have a device, all that stuff is configured here. And in here, you can configure it. Depending on your permissions, you get access to only certain things. Maybe in your company, if you would open this up, there would be a message, hey, you're not allowed to see this because the Entra portal is blocked for normal users. So you can still access it, but there is no way that you can actually see the users and stuff like that. And there's two ways to access the portal. One is entra.microsoft.com, and the, I would say, legacy way, but still available, is through portal.azure.com. And in here, you can also, just in here, look for Entra ID, and there you have it. It's basically looking a bit different, but has most of the same configurations. But the old portal, it does not have everything. So if you want to make sure that you get the greatest and latest of everything, then use entra.microsoft.com. And yeah, so as you can see, conditional access is right here. You can even set like favorites, and then they are available in the favorite section up here. And yeah, so that would be the area where we are concentrating now. And just by looking at what we have otherwise here, you can yeah, see how big the universe in Entra ID is getting and already has gotten. So it's no longer just a bit of users and groups that you can administer here, but it's from workflows to cross-tenant configurations, so different companies working together, all that stuff is possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Just typing like a summary, but feel free to continue, man. This is a very good explanation.
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, so as you have seen already, maybe when I clicked on the resources, this is one thing. So if we go into select resources, we get different options what we can select. And let me just select the sections here. And there you will see there is some of the stuff that more looks like applications. So you see Office 365. Might be Microsoft 365 in your environment, but this is more of a catch-all for different applications in the Microsoft ecosystem. And if you want to target those, then you should use this instead of going through the different single ones. So you can go in here and try to find Exchange Online and all that stuff, but I wouldn't recommend it, and Microsoft does neither. So rather use those catch-all ones, because they make sure that the correct resources behind those applications are targeted. And this basically helps you to say, okay, when conditional access policy should be applicable, when it should be applied. And one of the things is a user is a resource, but also we can also say, hey, this is for all users or only a selected group, selected group of users, and even groups in the actual sense. So we can also say all users in group XYZ are targeted and scoped by this conditional access policy. We have a bit of a discussion in there, I think, about the pricing about conditional access. So yes, conditional access is basically, for the basic parts, you require Entra ID P2 license, P1 license. For some of the stuff like risk-based things, it's P2, but for the just conditional access, I would say it's Entra P1. In the free version of Entra ID, you get something called security defaults. It's basically just a toggle. You can switch it on, you should, and it makes a lot of the stuff like MFA required and such. Yeah, the default in your tenant. But if you want to have granular control, it's the P1 license that you need. So I won't go through every single bit of here, but let me highlight a few things that are getting more and more crucial here. So we now have not only networks as in something like any network or all trusted networks. Trusted networks are based on IP addresses or country codes. So if I select this, I don't get any extra selection. I have to do this in another menu. But there's also something called all compliant network locations. And this is basically Microsoft has a feature called Global Secure Access. And if you are using this client, the Global Secure Access client, and accessing the Entra ID world and signing in through it, you after that are routed through Microsoft's network, and it is identified as a compliant network. So this is basically one of the most recent additions to the whole conditional access stack, and it is really, a new way of looking into networks. So it's not just IP address based, but more of, hey, you have to sign into this network, and after that we see that you are coming from a compliant network.
Just a question about this, Fabian, because we had a client and we were trying to phish him using Evilginx. And all of the accounts didn't have proper measures against adversary in the middle. But he configured his account to have a device filter. So in Intune, yeah. So he had in Intune, he configured his laptop, Windows 10, perfectly fine, and device filter enabled, and it was not possible to phish him because, from what my understanding is, that there's a specific a PTR, I think, which only sends itself to the official Microsoft page. So any domain that's not the official Microsoft, it will not be sent to. Is this correct from my understanding, or is there an easier way to get kind of the same phishing resistance from an easy setting, or must it always be this difficult?
So if we are looking into the whole how phishing with Evilginx works and how we can mitigate it, there's a few controls that are super helpful. There's basically the either require device to be marked as compliant. So there you don't need any device filter configured, but of course your device has to be part of Entra and also either Intune or another MDM that gives you the compliant flag. But if you have selected this, then basically in the backend, there is a more certificate-based authentication flow that is resistant to the default ATM attacks that we see out in the wild. And the other one would also be require Microsoft Entra hybrid joint devices. But I do not recommend hybrid joint devices. Hybrid in this sense means they are member of a local Active Directory and are synced to Entra ID. I would rather urge you to go to a fully cloud managed solution here, because basically it's not helping you a lot to keep them on-prem. Rather move them out from Active Directory and move them into Entra only. They only add to your on-prem attack surface. And but it's the same thing here because they basically use this device authentication in the backend. And what most likely this customer did is you can also go into really deep into the configuration here, into conditions, filter for devices, and then make sure that you either include or exclude devices from a certain policy. And if this is the case, and you make sure that basically this has to be a device, then this device has to be also registered. And again, as soon as we are talking about the part where the sign-in has to be from Entra ID joined or registered device, we are always talking about some sort of certificate matching in the backend, and then these phishing attacks don't work anymore. and you also mentioned it already, it's a primary refresh token, PRT, that is saved on the device. And that's basically a certificate stored in the TPM of the system. And this, together with some other measures, because the PRT never leaves the device, but it's used to sign certain artifacts. And this helps a lot in mitigating those attacks. But of course, there are also always issues where you might not be able to join all your devices into Entra, because maybe you have contractors or something in there that basically don't have a company device and cannot join their own.
Yes, exactly this. So the network setting that you showed, the new one, this has nothing to do with this, right? It doesn't like help with this at all. Right?
No, it's unrelated, but for this compliant network part, you need another agent on the device. It's currently available for, I think, the mobile operating system was Windows and Mac OS, but there's a bit of a different story there. Yeah, and Peter also writes correctly that you can even go in there and lock it down to certain things like the device filter, to certain things like a device attribute, making it really hard for an attacker to phish you or even attack you further if they are not on the correct device itself. Nice example with the PAW. So you have an extra device that is like only for administering, and if you have a conditional access policy requiring you to come from this device, then it's getting really hard for attackers to compromise your identity. Of course, there's other stuff they could try to do, but it's one of the best countermeasures at the moment. All right. Let's dive in a bit more. So when we have something like the special cases, we already looked at them, Office 365 admin portals and all resources, and also as a service management API, they are a bit of a different beast. They might not be only targeting one resource, but multiple. Nowadays, you can see this also in the sign-in logs. That was not true for, not always true. Let me just try to find a user here where I can show you this. Who will we have? Let's see if Katie has signed in recently. Katie is on vacation. So basically, there is an option to show those different cases and the actual resources behind it nowadays. So since July last year, we can finally basically target all the resources or service principals in any Entra ID. It might be that you have to manually add the service principal in your Entra ID before you can scope it, but for a long time you were not able to select everything. There were some certain first-party apps just not available in the list. And even if you tried to go through API, it was not possible. But nowadays, basically, you can do this yourself. And if you ever come up with a service principal that you want to add, but it's not available to add, so something like this here. So I have an ID from a service principal. I want to scope something to it, but I cannot do it. Then there is a command that was really fast, but it's basically the add AZADSP create. Let me just put that at AZADSP create, and then ID UUID. With this, you can create basically any service principal in your environment that is a multi-tenant app. And as you can see here now it's getting resolved, and it's in this case the Microsoft Tunnel Gateway service. There is one really, really important recommendation by Microsoft. And this is that you have a baseline multi-factor authentication policy targeting all the users and all resources as a real baseline. So this is meant to protect all of your environment using MFA. And why this is important, and why Microsoft is highlighting this part here without any app exclusions, we will see in a minute. But the idea behind that would be that you go in here and be like, hey, MFA, everybody, select all users, select all resources, and go in here, grant control, require multi-factor authentication, and that would be basically it. So this is the simplest way of having all users in the environment requiring MFA. And then if you would do something like this, then I guess you would have a bad day the moment you clicked OK, because there will be consequences in the form of, hey, everybody has to register MFA. That, of course, is something that we want, but there might be users in your environment that cannot register, and those you should look at first, and that is why they also recommend to go in a report-only mode first. If you have an admin user, make sure that this admin user has a FIDO or passkey assigned to it, and do not exclude yourself. You might want to still exclude your break glass accounts, even if they have an MFA requirement out of the box, since they have to access the Azure portal or an admin portal, and admin portals by default now are MFA requirements by Microsoft. I saw in the questions in here that how about passkeys, FIDO, and downgrade attacks? If you go in here and be like, hey, require authentication strengths, and you require at least phishing resistant MFA, then this means that any downgrade attack is no longer possible. Every user must use either FIDO or passkey, and otherwise they will be blocked. This is something I highly recommend for administrators, of course. So for your admin group, definitely have something like this in place. But for normal users, I think at the moment it's not the easiest way to implement yet. With passkeys, it's getting there slowly. But don't do this again just on a Friday evening and then hit the road home.
And just while we're on this topic, Fabian, there's different because FIDO is a protocol, and for example, you have the YubiKey, which you can use. But do you have a specific recommendation for a specific model or a type, or it really doesn't matter?
So there is a list of Microsoft officially supported security keys. So that might be something where you want to look out for. But I guess everything that supports attestation, which is super important, is basically okay. Let me just see if I can find the supported lists. And yeah, there it is. So let me just throw that in here. So there is a list of different vendors out there and what is supported. As you can see, it's not only just the vendor itself, but also down to at least the make and model. And in here you will find a lot of different ones, from like ACS FIDO Authenticator, which is, I think, a software, to the CTPass Smart Auth. And in between, of course, we see the big names like YubiKey, we see Token2, we see everything you need. If you look into those, make sure, especially if you also want to use passkey in other spaces more and more for yourself, that they support a lot of passkeys, because in the beginning, especially the older YubiKeys I'm aware of, they only supported like 25 or something passkeys, which of course gets quite cumbersome at some point. You don't want to have 4 YubiKeys for all your accounts. But nowadays there is more and more that support hundreds of them, and that is not really a big thing anymore. But yeah, just have a look into how many slots for passkeys those keys have. And as you said, Anas, basically FIDO or the WebAuthn protocol is something that is basically just a big name, and Passkey is now the new name for even those FIDO2 keys. So Passkey is basically the marketing name for all of that. And there is a difference between those security keys. They are called device-bound passkeys, and then you have your default syncable passkeys that maybe live on your mobile phone, but also are backed up to your provider of choice, like Apple, Google, Bitwarden, whatever it is.
Okay, just a final question on this topic. I hope it's not taking too long with all of these questions, Fabian. But I'm just enjoying it a lot. So let's say I get one of those passkeys and I want to use it for everything. So I also combine it with my password manager, for example, and try to get into all of this. Do you have a specific recommendation for like a certain stack, maybe like Bitwarden with like a YubiKey or whatever, or maybe something from your own experience, or do you say like everyone does their own research?
Yeah, so personally, for a long time, I used Bitwarden as a self-hosted option, but even for the self-hosted, they now raising the prices. So currently, I'm looking into options, what is out there. But I guess, especially for the passkey ones, depending on your threat profile, you might as well just go for the native one of your operating system of choice, so either being it Apple or Google, because just storing passkeys is a lot less frictionful compared to what you had with like passwords. So you no longer need good integration in the browser or whatever. It just works out of the box and with the new operating systems for most of that. So other than that, have a look at how they do their storage. There's a few good papers I think were released early this year about certain vendors having some security issues in that space, and also of course pricing. Yeah, KeePassXC also a good option in the chat. So this is basically the option where you store it in file on your own device. Just make sure, but that is basically a complete another story. There is no hardware-backed option for that. So KeePassXC is basically, if it's compromised, if your device is compromised, all your passkeys might be as well. But that is, of course, also true for something like Bitwarden or anything else that not really enforces hardware backed encryption on device. All right, let's get back a bit on track and talk about why I highlighted without any app exclusions here. And that is basically because there is documented bypasses. And if I would have asked you if any of you would spot the difference between those two configurations. So on the left side, we have all users, specified users excluded, always the prey class. We have it targeted to all resources. And then we have the MFA control down on the left side. And then we have another one, another configuration. There we have all resources but one. So in this case, we have the My Work ID excluded from the all MFA. And then we have another one that we included here. So basically, they should cover the exact same. And I like your style in the chat. That is, of course, also my meme of choice here. So yeah, they just look the same, and you would expect that they do the same. And for a long time, this was not the case. So when I was writing all this up, then there was a nice documentation from Microsoft that was saying, hey, if any app is excluded from the policy in order to not inadvertently block user access, certain low privilege scopes are excluded from policy enforcement. And these scopes allow calls to the underlying graph APIs, that is either the Azure AD graph or the Microsoft graph. And as you can see down there, those low privilege scopes where user read, profile, OpenID, offline access email, and for Microsoft Graph, even people read. And then for confidential clients, it was even more, user read all, user basic read all. So this meant that there was exclusion built in. And for you, this means as soon as you didn't have this basic catch-all apps or all resources policy, then all of those resources and with those scopes, those would be accessible. And yeah, I have a nice demo about this, and we will see something, I would say, for a demo, not so nice, but for us in the security field, very nice. So let's go in here. Let me just switch up for this. Sorry, that was too far behind. Let me just switch up the demo so I get the wrong commandlets, because as you all might know, typing is, at least for me, not possible when somebody's watching. So in here, I'm using the token text v2, a small PowerShell helper script that allows us to build certain Entra sign-ins, doing refresh of get token acquisition with refresh tokens, stuff like that. And there we have a user called MFA required. We want to sign in with this user, and yeah, as we would expect, MFA is required. Perfect. That is exactly what we want to have. And why did we use this funny little thing here? In this case, we said, hey, we want to have a special scope. That's a scope just for the Graph API, and we want to have this for default. Okay, let's do the same thing, but with another user. And in this case, the other user is called MFA require with one exclusion. So this is the one where Microsoft for a long time had the problem that we were not blocked. But let's have a look. I'm going in here. I'm entering the password, and okay, in this case, I need to confirm my identity. I have to do MFA, but I'm blocked. Why is that? So about a year ago, when I first showed this on stage, this was working. I was getting a nice little access token for the graph, and then I could request information, not only about me, but also about devices and everything else. So what happened in between? Microsoft had a long guide about mitigation, what you can do and how to edit and all that stuff. But Microsoft now decided, hey, all fun and dandy if we do this in this way, but nobody will ever implement it. So in this case, they were like, okay, let's make something better. Let's make this default. And you will have something like this, the MC something in the message center, where they are telling you, hey, we will change the behavior starting May 2026. And as you can see, I already enabled it. And in my case, it's basically saying, hey, regardless of the scope, regardless how low it is, we will always honor if you have any configuration for this target resource. You can also select a different one, your own one, but by default, it's the Windows Azure AD Active Directory. And this is basically the mitigation that was before a lot of clicks and a lot of work. And that is why the demo is no longer working. So really good job, Microsoft. They fixed it here.
I have a question, Fabian. Are you saying, because usually when you want to log in to something that's protected with conditional access, you need for example, and it has MFA, you need an additional factor to log in, but you are saying that the two images are not the same. So when you exclude something, it removes completely the second factor, for example, from the resources that you mentioned. So I would only need username and password to access those resources?
Correct. So basically, if you had configured something like this, and you were accessing a resource, or only the resource Microsoft Graph, or Azure AD Graph, with what Microsoft is calling low scopes, so those scopes, you were not requested for any MFA. So even if you had configured MFA and you were thinking it was secure, there was basically a little gap that was described in the documentation, but still a lot of people were not aware of. And I could at least read some of the user information without even having access to the user itself.
But you're also saying email. So are you saying, for example, a company?
No. So as you can see here, it's restricted to certain permissions or scopes in this case. So email is a default OAuth 2 scope, and it's not the Exchange permission to read emails in Exchange Online, but it's basically you can read the email attribute of the user.
So this would, example, a whole company has YubiKeys, but they have the discrepancy in the two images. I would still, just with the email plus password, be able to get user read, for example, get some information of all of the users, you're saying?
Yes, correct.
Oh, that's awesome.
Not all of the users, but for that user where you also have compromised the password.
Okay, so it's not like, you wouldn't call this like a critical vulnerability, right?
No, it was not that big of a deal, but still, it's really nice. Microsoft has finally fixed it and made the mitigation a lot less intrusive than before, where you had to do a lot of clicking, configuring to get to the same thing. So as you can see here,
it's
you
not
had to do a lot.
It's not rolled out by default for everyone right now, right?
So it should be in the next 2 weeks.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, let's see. In the nick of time, I think one of the bigger ones, let's have at least a look. This was the big one that came out, I think, back in 2024. End of 2024, it was released publicly at Black Hat Europe by Yuya, and he did an amazing job. It's an amazing presentation. You should definitely watch it. It's also something that Dirk-Jan Mollema also found quite some time before. And when I looked into my research back then, I also had it in my research, but I never connected the dots that this was an error. I always thought I had configured something wrong. And it's basically, there was always this hen and egg problem with a device in Entra. So if you wanted to join a device, a new laptop maybe, but you were enforcing device compliance, how could you register the device before it was actually compliant? And how could it get compliant without being registered? In the beginning of time in Azure AD back then, you had to do manually exclusions for that. But at some point, somebody at Microsoft was like, hey, we are getting, or at least this is my idea how the story went. So it might be a completely different story, but my idea is there were a lot of support requests and a lot of people annoyed by, hey, I cannot join my device and just because I have compliant device configured. And that is when we got this. So we have a sign-in that says success, but we have a conditional access policy that says failure. And that, of course, is not normal. So if a conditional access policy fails, then it should be no success. And that is what triggered basically the research and the idea behind it. And this one was a lot bigger because it was scoped only to the company portal client ID, and this had a hard-coded exclusion. And in the beginning, this hard-coded exclusion was for the resource Azure AD graph with user impersonation. And in the end, this meant that you could, if you signed in, sign in without a device, compliant device, and if the user you were signing in to with had like global admin, then you basically can do everything through the old Azure AD graph, which is still available and you can still use it. And user impersonate means you get the same permissions. So Dirk-Jan found this some way back in 2023, and in the end of 2024, it was then released by Yuya Chudo, who found it independently of Dirk-Jan. Basically, it still works to some extent. Let me try to... No, we will skip this demo. I think we don't have the time. But it's basically, you were able to connect to different things. When this was all released, Microsoft got a bit hectic. Before they were like, no, this is all fine and dandy. And then Alex Simmons was like, hey, we have to do something. Alex Simmons back at the time was the lead of Identity. And then Dirk-Jan was testing, you can see around 20th of February, and then suddenly the whole permissions were no longer user impersonate, but it was suddenly just some read permissions. And if we have a look on the website EntraScopes.com, and if I can type it, we can still find this. So if we search for the Microsoft Intune Company Portal, there you can see the stuff that was documented back then. But in here, if we scroll down and we're looking for the Azure, let me just scroll down here so you can see it's service principal, endpoint read all, and user read. So they locked it down quite hard. You still could read a lot, but you were no longer able to compromise a whole company without needing a compliant device. Another bypass back then is the device registration bypass, and this is also documented and still active because, again, we are in the same problem. How can you limit something like device registration? And Microsoft decided it's an user action, as we have seen before. So if you all remember, when we were in the conditional access part and in the new policy, there was this user action one, and there's register or join device. So this is an action. And a user action, if you select that, says, hey, you can only require multi-factor authentication or authentication strengths. Meaning everything that, like maybe network location or something like that, is not in scope. So if you were thinking, hey, I want to limit device registrations only to the IP addresses of my company, good luck, this won't work. MFA is basically the only enforcement level that you have. This is not true for Intune join, but for device registration in Entra, this is true. I also contacted MSRC about that, and it was also mentioned as expected behavior as not fixed.
From my understanding, Fabian, if you register, for example, if you phish someone, and you usually have the ability to register a device for most companies after you phish someone, and then you can get like a primary refresh token from that and all of that. But usually it doesn't lead to anything after that. Or am I looking at it wrong?
That depends on if this company is doing more than just allowing you to register a device. So if they have maybe a device compliance enforced, then this helps you only partially. But there is some combinations in there. Basically, Intune by default, if you have not configured anything, if you have a device in Intune that has no compliance policy applied to it, then it is automatically a compliant device, meaning you're just a registered device without having anything that makes it compliant is getting compliant. And the other thing is, if you have a primary refresh token and are joined into the Entra ID, there might be other options for you to try to acquire access tokens, because maybe the company has some policy, conditional access policy, that allows you to access the environment from a device that, even if you are outside of the network that they otherwise require or something like this. So it could be a problem. It's not by default, but depending on what the other security controls in this environment are.
Awesome. Thank you for your answer, Fabian.
Then we also have the new kid on the block, the Global Secure Access. And in this case, Microsoft has, from the beginning, a very good documentation out there, what they have excluded. And again, this would have been a chicken and egg problem if they hadn't done it. So a few resources, the traffic profiles and the policy service, are excluded from the requirement of having a compliant network. But you still can do MFA and compliant device, all that stuff. So it's just one control that they had to exclude. But since you get through access to those resources in the position to actually get into the network, and then you are on the compliant network, of course, it's not possible to have a compliant network before you have access to those. And then there was a long list, or is a long list, of Microsoft recommended exclusions. I will go through them real fast. If you have any questions, just drop in or in the chat. But basically, if you go through the Microsoft documentation, you will find funny required exclusions here and there. Stuff like, hey, Windows subscription activation. If you are not on a current Windows 11 system, then you have to exclude certain cloud apps. And as you can guess, all this, if it happens in an enterprise environment, and those exclusions, if they are set at one point before the new Windows 11 23 H2 was released, they won't be removed just easily. So they will stay there most likely forever, or until somebody has to clean up. But yeah, that can take a long time. The device registration service itself was also something that Microsoft was like, hey, if you use device code flow for device registration purpose, then maybe excluded from the all resources in your conditional access policy. Also, maybe not the best advice. Of course, it makes stuff working, but it also breaks some other stuff. Then Defender for Cloud Apps. Yeah, there was also interesting recommendation, since you should not block it until you know what you are doing. So this was like giving the user a knife and being like, yeah, but don't use it until you know how to use it, but I won't show you why not to use it. So yeah, it's a bit of a interesting saying, just being like, yeah, maybe exclude it, and only if you are deliberate that you want to do this, then do it. So yeah, I think it's more of a precaution thing that Microsoft put in here, but I think it's not best practice to do that. Then, of course, stuff like shared Teams phones, that is still a big problem because, hey, yeah, they cannot do sign-in frequencies, so you have to exclude them. So as you can see, there's a lot of different stuff, and even like multi-factor authentication, they're like recommending not doing on those phones. Defender for Mobile had the same thing. So here we see those low-level scopes. If Defender requests user read and the Intune tunnel scope, then you have to exclude them. And they actually were recommending that you just exclude any one cloud app, because they basically were abusing this behavior I showed you before. And for the tunnel gateway, they explicitly named, hey, you please exclude that. And then there was also this funny thing in here. So applying a conditional access policies to all cloud apps could inadvertently block users' access in some cases. So it's not recommended. Yeah, okay. I think we had two recommendations here. Microsoft recommends a baseline MFA for everybody, and it's not recommended to do this for all cloud apps. Yeah, that does not work well, but luckily this sentence was removed. This nice guy was doing that, or no, this nice guy. And yeah, so Microsoft is also cleaning up their documentation, which is really great to see that they're finally doing that. But yeah, there was definitely some ill advice in there, and that could lead to potential problems. Yeah, and we can see it's not removed everywhere. And then they also, again, have, hey, remove those certain apps in here. So a lot of different things where they be like, hey, remove certain apps from the control. And the important thing is always to see what kind of exclusions that they want, because if you exclude too much, it could lead to a bad security in your environment. That is because it is basically, yeah, you applied a recommendation of Microsoft too broadly. But since the documentation about them is sometimes a bit crude, that definitely can happen easily. Yeah, Rafael Witt has a great list of all those also on his LinkedIn. Definitely check that out. I'm not sure if I can copy this from here. I will try to put it in the chat in a minute. But yeah, that was basically everything we had about, hey, documentation, and yeah, it's just there. But more interestingly, in the research that Dirk-Jan and I looked into were the undocumented bypasses. And one of those was this one here. So you can see I have a user, it's called must be compliant and MFA for all actions. So this user definitely had like full MFA and device compliance enforced. We can see here, this is the conditional access policy. What if? We need device compliance, we need MFA, And again, just to make sure, user must be compliant is in scope, and it is scoped to all resources, no exclusions back then. And yeah, it's just the simple require device to be marked compliant. And just to make my point, I also show here how I access Outlook. I'm using the temporary access pass, which gives me automatically MFA, just to make sure. And yeah, I cannot access it because I need a compliant device. But then I found something really interesting, and that was if I'm using the correct method, and that is the Microsoft Authenticator app, and sign in with this, I will also get a nice message here. Oh, yeah, I have to enter my tab. Let's enter this. And, oh, are you trying to sign in? Yes, I'm doing that. And what is that? And there I just got the authentication code back. Now I'm using the authentication code, dropping in to token tactics, and then I'm using the get Azure token from authorization code commandlet, and suddenly I had a really nice access token for access to, and in this case, this was to Microsoft Graph. So no, 003 something is always Microsoft Graph. And we can see this was through the Microsoft Authenticator app. And I'm not on a compliant device. That definitely should not have happened. And interestingly, it only happened if I had a certain set of scopes. To make sure that it also works, I was connecting to Microsoft Graph, and then getting the access, the context, and you can see here I have the user authentication method read permission. And with that, what I can do now is I can read which user authentication methods this user has registered, meaning I get information about maybe which phone the user is using for their SMS. And this, of course, for somebody who is also capable of doing like something like a SIM swap or something, might be a really interesting way of compromising a user. They have a usable. And now,
I think your audio might be cutting away. Insert music in the meantime.
I hope you can hear me now again.
Yes. Yes, perfect. We can hear you again.
All right,
Awesome.
okay. It was a Microsoft headset, so yeah, you might be true.
That's good. I'm already tired enough of Discord doing bullshit, so I'm glad it's the headphones.
All right. No, I think I just had not charge them enough. Yeah, so as you can see, basically this gave me back then the ability to read the registered authentication methods, which of course is not a good thing. And yeah, basically this was only available if I used the correct app, including the correct scope bypasses. So it was really just a very narrow exclusions that they had built in. But it also shows that Microsoft at some point in their history started to exclude certain things in the conditional access set that should not be excluded, but they needed it for some reason, and that's why they did it. Yeah, they fixed it in about close to 3 months or 4 months, and then back in 2025 I reported, publicly disclosed it at Troopers in the talk. And the interesting thing is you still get a token, but if you then connect to Microsoft Graph is like, nah, you cannot do that. So they didn't fix it completely in the Entra ID part, but rather in the resource part. Don't know why that is. Most likely they didn't want to break a lot of the authenticator apps running out there in the wild that might otherwise have crashed. So this way they were able to block the call, and that silently was accepted by the authenticator app, but still were able to mitigate the risk. And all this, triggered a lot of other research back then. And one of the outcomes was basically there is certain other things like the device management service that is not protected by device compliance when using Microsoft Teams. You get quite the permissions, but you cannot really use it for much because the device management service itself is not a service that is like super well documented. And if anybody finds a way to really abuse it, let me know. MSRC back then was like, yeah, no, it's okay, it's just non-sensitive tenant data. And while we were looking into this, we came into more and more of those little exclusions, and then finally we came to a complete list of resources that basically are completely excluded from any conditional access. So Intune check-in, Windows. Yeah.
Well, 1 second before you continue with this, just like for people who maybe have never done this before, or this is new to them, basically the idea is that you have the administrators, they're trying to lock stuff down using conditional access. All my employees can only log in if they have email plus password plus a YubiKey or whatever, or like the Microsoft application with the number on the screen. They're doing their best to close everything down. But at the end of the day, if you do certain things, for example, you send a phishing mail, but instead of you sending people to the Outlook application, the Exchange, you send them, to example, to the Intune management portal to log in from there. It turns out there are certain things, if they log in there, then a lot of the defense mechanisms they have built in, like, oh, you need to be in a certain network, or you need to be on a certain computer or laptop or whatever, compliant device, just like they disappear. The defense mechanisms just disappear at certain applications, So that's basically Fabian's displaying all of the old and more current methods where people can just bypass all of these mechanisms that are supposed to protect the entirety of Office 365, which is very, very cool. So sorry for interrupting, but I just thought about maybe someone token tactics, for example, has never seen this, or all of this. That's why.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Exactly, and one of the problems here is always how much impact it has really have. So, as I said, with this service, I wasn't able to actually do something with it. So I was not able to like delete a device or something like that. This would have proven impact and might be something where I could be like, hey, MSRC, do something about it. But yeah, basically, since I wasn't able to use this service, and I think it's even using certificate-based authentication for the devices itself, it's not that easy. But especially this list really surprised us that a lot of the resources here are also like completely excluded from the conditional access controls as a whole. So basically, regardless of which conditional access policy you configure, if you access one of those resources, it will not be applied. And Microsoft again says, hey, yeah, no security concerns. But there might be something in here where you have enough permissions, enough something to do, where you can actually do something. But yeah, so far we were not able to prove it. But in the end, as I said, many of those things are only applicable to a small thing. And we all know this nice sentence. I hope nobody now throws up in their seat because they have heard it too much. These attackers think in graphs, defenders think in lists, and yeah, conditional access admins, they have to think in cheese because they have to think in layers. Most of those things that we have seen only are exclusions from one of those controls. So if we have our there is some issue with the animation here. Let me just try this again. Okay. So basically, if you have a conditional access policy for MFA, there might be a hole in this. There might be a hole in the compliance part. There might be a hole in the network part. There might be a hole in the GSA part. But depending on how you align them, those holes might not line up against each other. And even for those that we have just seen, where basically I just told you they are excluded, those resources are excluded from everything, there's one control that blocks them all. And I don't know if anybody who has not yet seen the slide deck might want to take a guess what that is. It's basically the old way of enforcing MFA. It's the user-based MFA. This is like not recommended anymore for a really long time. But if you enable user-based MFA in the old portal, and I can just show you this in a minute, basically all those little holes that are in conditional access are mitigated. That is why I don't understand why Microsoft is not just closing them even in conditional access. But yeah, for some reason they decided not to. And if we go in here, again, we have conditional access. We can configure all this MFA stuff. Then we have authentication methods where we can configure all these nice things. But there was I don't know if I can still get to it in my environment because I moved away from a lot of it. Let me try through the old portal. User. Let's go here. Yeah, there it is. So this is the old portal, not the really old one, but the old portal migrated. And in here you can be like, hey, for this user, I want to enable MFA, and I can also, after it has enabled, enforce MFA. And this is the per user MFA. So if you want to secure your whole company with this, good luck, because it's a lot. There is now a Graph API you can do this with, but it's definitely not recommended to doing this. And yeah, you can see here now it is set to enforced. So definitely not something that we want to do, but funnily enough, this basically was the one method that blocked all the holes, because it's even blocking those that bypass everything. But for most of you, if you look at the slide before that, most of the holes don't line up. So if you have MFA in place and device compliance, then this already closes basically all the important holes that I presented today. Because now the attacker needs to compromise MFA or device compliance, or basically to come forward both in the end. So always, if you exclude something in conditional access, make sure that you have something that mitigates this risk that you just introduced. And if you have a control that requires device compliance and you know that there is a problem with the device compliance initial setup step, then just add MFA for the users to do this, because now they need at least MFA to even get there. Of course, with ATM, all that stuff, there is potential for that, but now you can be like, hey, if you want to register a device, you need a FIDO key using authentication strings, and suddenly this gets a whole lot more complicated to register a new device and get a compliant device on the network. If you want to look for new holes like this, back then Dirk-Jan and I built a whole tooling chain about it, but basically one of the first one that was found is relatively easy to spot. So if you're looking for, hey, in the sign-in logs, the unified sign-in logs is a special function by me, but you can do this for sign-in logs as something or the AED interactive sign-in logs and non-interactive sign-in logs yourself. And also on my blog, you will find this unified sign-in logs as well. But you're looking for conditional access status is success, but in the conditional access policies, we have failure. And then in here, I also use MV apply to get exactly to the conditional access policy that was failing. So making it quite easy to spot where this was. Or if you want to see, hey, where is no conditional access policy not applied, you can look for everything that has those brackets. Of course, make sure that your baseline is at least one policy that always gets applied. Otherwise, of course, you will get a lot of those if you have a spotty conditional access policy. But you can even use it for that and see, hey, what kind of stuff did I miss, or what did I have excluded in my environment? So in my lab environment, if we want to take a peek, let's go just quickly in here and run this query. I'm most certain that there is a lot of stuff in here, because my conditional access policy is not the best. Oh no, Microsoft Azure PowerShell not applied anything. So that should not be, but that's because I messed up somewhere in my configuration. Yeah, just to make sure you can do this quite easily, use those hunting queries if you export the data, or if you have Defender XDR, you can change it a bit and use the Entra sign-in logs in the Defender XDR advanced hunting. And then Back then, we also released EntraScopes. I already have shown it to you, but it's a website where we have a lot of the stuff that came out of Dirk-Jan's and my research, and also of other people. And in here, you can be like, hey, I want to see only so-called pokey apps, or I want to see everything that is vulnerable to the auth code fix or content fix that was very popular at the end of the year last year. Or basically here, is there a bypass available? And then you will have a long list of different things where a bypass is available. And if you click on it, you will also get an explanation what kind of bypass is available and if it's still active or not. If you find something that is no longer active, please let me know. I try to keep this up to date, but as always, sometimes it's not as easy to always know when Microsoft is changing something, and it's not something we are testing every day. But yeah, you can see this one was a big one. So the user impersonation part, it was mitigated, and now we still have some of the exclusions, but by far no longer the big ones in here.
Fabian, I also have a question. There was a question from Kurt. He said, would you still require MFA prompts on a managed compliant device for knowledged workers, like every so many hours or days? Or is Windows Hello a perfect perimeter? So he's also asking about Windows Hello, because I think like maybe you can explain what that is exactly. And Microsoft is saying that it's also phishing resistant. And yeah, maybe you can tell us a bit about that.
So yeah, definitely. Requiring MFA as a baseline, regardless of where your clients or users are, is definitely my recommendation. So even if they come from a compliant device, I still want to have also MFA. I always want to have both, if possible. And the best option to have MFA and still a good user experience is something like Windows Hello. With Windows Hello, the user has, in the best case, something like a fingerprint or a Hello camera, or even if they don't want to do that, they can use just a PIN. And this PIN is not stored anywhere in Entra, is never sent over the wire, but it's basically using a certificate baked into the TPM to authenticate. And funnily enough, this is quite the same thing as a passkey. So it's also phishing resistant, and also the same protocol with some quirks, of course, because Microsoft implemented that back in a day when not all of this was yet standardized. It's basically usable. So Windows Hello for Business is super FIDO compliant. Yeah, Peter, correct. It's not 100% FIDO, but it's FIDO compliant, and it definitely works perfect. And nowadays, there's even the nice option that you can store passkeys in the Windows Hello container for other Entra tenants. So if you are a contractor or something and you have a lot of customers, you don't want to remember all the different passwords, you can use basically your Windows Hello container to store the passkeys in there. So then no hardware is required at all. Of course, you still should have at least one backup key if your laptop at some point in time gets crashed by a Windows update or something else. But yeah, this is, I think, currently the most easy way to sign in. I do this on my computer here, so let me just show you this. It's so nice. I love this experience. I go to my environment here. I can select this, and now my Windows Hello camera gets on. I just select OK, and hey, pop, I'm now signed in. So super easy experience. And with Windows Hello for Business on the other side, you also have MFA claim in there. You are on a compliant device. You have MFA, you have compliant device. all good. And for the user, it's not like they have to go through a push notification on their mobile or anything. They just have their device, and this is their second factor.
And clients, they also want to be able to log in besides their Windows laptop from their phone. What is the best recommendation to also stay phishing resistant while being on the phone?
In this case, I would either recommend, and this is a bit of a tough one, if you want to allow synced passkeys or not, but let's not discuss the whole passkey thing in 10 minutes. But basically, the idea behind it would be use maybe, if you want to get secure, device-bound passkeys on the mobile phone. So you onboard the user using a temporary access pass. With that, they register a passkey that is stored on the phone, secure enclave, and then the user has also a backup if something happens to the laptop. They can just use their phone and the cross-device authentication part of passkey to sign into the new laptop. And on the laptop, on the phone itself, they also have a passkey that is securely stored and also allows them to sign in using MFA.
That's awesome. Let me see if there's any more questions. Fabian, your presentation, did you have some more things that you wanted to show us, or should we go to the questions?
No, we can definitely go to the questions. Basically, that was it. I think the only last slide I had is if you want to try out token tactics. It's also, I think it was also already linked in the comments. You will find it here with some explanation. It's expanding, new commandlets coming in here. Whenever I find something, you can even do passkey authentication with token tactics. So the person that used KeePass XC can wonderfully use token tactics to sign into his tenant.
Could you give us like maybe a 30-second, 50-second summary of when token tactics would be an interesting tool to use? Just for like maybe more for beginners, like why would they use token tactics?
So in the whole Entra ID world, there is on the one hand a lot of different artifacts when you sign in. You have something like access token, refresh token, bearer token, ID token, primary refresh token, all that stuff. And with token tactics, you can just game around a bit, play around a bit with all those tokens, find out how they work, how this whole thing about these family of client IDs works. That is what Anas mentioned previously, where you can exchange a token from one app to another app. That should not be the case normally, but Microsoft has implemented a special group of apps. And basically, this toolkit gives you the opportunity to play around with it and get those tokens and try to figure out how they work, what is possible, what is not possible. And I use it also a lot for testing that stuff, finding quirks in the whole environment. And initially, it was not written by me, so the initial token tactics was written by Reverse Shell, Stefan Borosh, and Bobby Koch. And I rewrote it and named it V2 just out of the fact that they used the Entra V1 endpoint to access Entra. And I needed it for some continuous access evaluation research I did, and this was only possible with the V2 endpoint, and I mixed so much stuff up in their module. I didn't want to do a PR basically saying, hey, I just replaced all the lines of code you implemented. Please apply this to your project. And that is why I forked it and named it like this. Nowadays, it supports both V1 and V2 because in the whole testing of the stuff that I just showed, I also wanted to make sure that it works in both versions of the conditional access policy evaluation.
That's awesome. I think I see two more questions. And Kurt says, thank you. Follow up on that. So he's following up on the Windows Hello for Business question. He said, how often should you prompt the user in that case? And how do you use sign-in frequency to enforce this? Did you scope it only on apps like Office 365 or other SaaS? By the way, just like addition to that, usually when we fish companies and we convert the browser cookie into access token and refresh token, we find that the refresh token on most companies here in the Netherlands is valid for 90 days. Maybe you see something else, Fabian. Only a couple companies that we have seen have set it to 12 hours, in where the company, the user can log in once a day, use it during the whole workday, and then the next day he needs to log in again. So that's what I've seen in the real world. Maybe Fabian has a different recommendation for this.
So one thing about the session control and sign-in frequency that you can select here, let's just go for maybe 8 hours, something like this, is that the sign-in frequency basically is only supported if you actually select all resources. So you cannot really scope it to just a few resources, and that makes it a bit problematic. If you want to do this on your company devices, I would not recommend setting this bar too low. Like if you want to make sure for your admins maybe that are not coming from a regular device or something like this, but using FIDO, I would go for something like 8 hours. In most cases, that should be enough for them to do their work over the day. For a regular knowledge worker, I'm not sure if I would, even on a compliant device, require the sign-in frequency or reduce the sign-in frequency. Because, again, we have Windows Hello in place, we have the device compliance in place, and both of that, if configured correctly with the TPM, makes it really hard to get those tokens out. And if you get one out, it's also that you have to refresh at some point, and then the refresh is no longer valid because you're no longer on the same device. But if you really want to do a sign-in frequency, I would rather go to a few days, just to make sure that if there is a hiccup in the initial sign-in, if they not like shut down or lock their device properly, that they don't get prompted. So basically, I'm going for, don't prompt your users. The user should never see a prompt of MFA in their life. They should use Windows Hello for Business and just unlock their device on a regular basis, and this basically will give them the new token, and then if it's set to like 2 days, 3 days, then normally if they don't go on holiday, they never will see it, and even if they go on holiday, they hopefully shut down their device, and after that come on with a clean and new authentication.
That's awesome. And Peter is asking, have you seen this issue before? 53003 access has been blocked by conditional access policies. The access policy does not allow token issuance. Both conditional access and report only are empty device. Is compliant and managed. So I don't know. He's asking, like, have you seen this or any advice where to look for something like this?
Oh, yeah, okay. So in this case, I would definitely have a look into the actual sign-in logs. So if you do not currently send them to a log analytics workspace, this does not have to be Sentinel. This could be a regular one, but there definitely have a look into those things here. And it was another 0 here. Let's see if I have a sample. I don't. Yeah, there we have some. So this is basically always the OYO is getting blocked. And if you want to know more about what is getting blocked, there's two options. Either you go through this if you have it, and then you can go in here in the conditional access policies and go through the different policies that basically make this problem. Or you can use the one that I showed before, and I will just drop this in the chat in a second. And I hope it comes through in some way. This basically goes in there and checks only for the conditional access policies that are in the state failure, meaning it will be blocking. They will be blocking you. And then you can see in this case, hey, Katie is only allowed through GSA. So Katie tried to sign in from a device that is not GSA, and that is the reason why she is getting blocked. So it's some other control in the conditional access setting. With this, you at least get into knowing why or what is the name of this policy, and then you can go in the maybe what if of conditional access. So in here you can be like, hey, what if, and then you configure the user, all that stuff, and try to resemble the conditions as good as possible through this settings that you see here. And then you should also see what is happening. And the last option, if you don't have any of this available, you can also use the sign-in logs in here. Sometimes it's not the most easiest to read them, but sometimes it's also quite easy. Again, we go here, search for the one that blocks you. So we don't have one here, but if we have one, you can go in here and you also get like a hint on where it is.
Okay, awesome. I don't see any other questions. I do see Peter typing. Personally, I have one more question, which is, do you have any recommendations for a guide that maybe is online for how to configure your office if you're new to this, or you just want some good settings or some baselines, what to follow? Do you know of anyone who's written like a nice guide with good recommendations?
There are a lot of great people having written stuff about that. Kenneth from the Netherlands has an intensive guide on conditional access. If you just want to check your environment and check it against the best practices, I can recommend Maester.dev. It's a tool that Merrill, Fernando, Thomas Naunheim, I, and a few other people, and a lot of people from the community nowadays have written, and this allows you to just test your whole environment and get a nice report, HTML report out of it, where you can see, hey, those are the recommendations, the security things you should implement, and it's more than just a few things. It's now hundreds of tests in here, but it's also a good starting point still.
Awesome. Hey, Fabian, it was really an honor having you, man. One of the first guests who literally, I think, answered everything that was asked to him. So, yeah, we like with depth and everything. So it's really an honor having you here. Really enjoyed the session. Thank you for being here, showing this to everyone. Thank you, everyone, for asking good questions and interacting and sharing memes. It was very fun. So yeah, once again, thank you, Fabian. Do you have anything that you want to share, or maybe where people should follow you, where you post a lot, or whatever?
Yeah, definitely. So if you are still on Twitter, I also post there regularly. Otherwise, you also find me on LinkedIn, and I think if you want to just see where I'm also, you can go to cloudbrothers.info, which is my website with all the blogs, and also links to the different social media profiles. And of course, also a feed reader if you still have something like that. And you can follow me, or at least my blog posts on this here.
Awesome. Thank you very much. It was an honor having you here. We'd love to have you back at any time that you have some time. And thank you everyone for being here. Everyone have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for the great questions. Good night.
Thank you very much. Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.